my honor to have Johanna Dunlop, somebody that I've known since 1998. So Johanna is Irish, living in France, and I'm mindful of the fact that next week is St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day, Johanna. She did her bachelor's in classics and French literature from Trinity College, Dublin, a city I absolutely love. Incidentally, I have a certificate having visited the Guinness factory out there. Believe it or not, there is a test you have to go through to make sure you can draw Guinness the right way. So after a few tries, I have a certificate. So as an alternate career, I guess they told me I can join a bar because I now know how to draw the Guinness the right way. So you bring some memories from there. Then she has a master's in business management from Boston University. My association with Johanna started when both of us were at Schlumberger. I was managing the Schlumberger's business in Mumbai when we became an OFS organization. We started, Johanna was leading the what is called SEED, Schlumberger Excellence in Educational Development Program, that I was the ambassador of while still at Schlumberger. And one of the exciting things we did in Mumbai was gave the technology connection to two very deserving students of two very deserving schools out there in 1998. So one of the finest community kind of times of my life, if I have to pick up, was absolutely wonderful seeing all of those students getting connected with the outside world, connected with specialists, etc. So since after that, Johanna has spent 3 years as the technical director focused on HSE until October 2020 with the Society of Petroleum Engineers, and is the chair and founder of the SPE's sustainability program called GAIA. And to tell everything about it, over to Johanna before touching on just a couple of points on the format of today's talk. So Johanna will speak for about 15 minutes talking about GAIA, and then we'll open it up for questions. And I do, as I mentioned it up there, the audience questions are more important than what I would like to pose to Johanna as moderator questions. So otherwise, a lot of times what you hear is moderators saying, we've completely run out of time. Thank you for putting in all of your questions. We'll get back to you. Most of the times, that doesn't happen. We are very mindful of those things. You spent your valuable time coming for this session. We want to give you the priority. So your questions will be answered first. So everybody will be on mute, but feel free to ask your question either through the chat window, or I'll let Mark open up all of the lines during the Q&A session. Feel free to ask the question through the audio as well. With that, thanks very much. Excited for this inaugural TCC Live. Johanna, over to you.
And thanks, Johanna. You should be able to take control and share your screen.
Okay, let's see. All right. I'm going to do that right now. Just give me 1 second. Pull up my TCC presentation. Make sure it's there. We go. Voila. Okay. So, well, thank you very much. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you. I'm sitting at home in Fontainebleau outside Paris, in the middle of the oldest and largest forest in France. And I'm delighted to be engaging with you in Houston which is a city I'm really missing, because normally I would have been there at least 2 or 3 times over the last year. And I'm really looking forward to visiting, I hope, sometimes towards the end of the year. Sudhir, thanks a million for that presentation and for inviting me to be here. And I remember well our time together implementing SEED, and in fact it was the start of SEED. And you were one of the leaders in the company who was most receptive to the idea. And I think this is, that was a phase in our industry where a lot of what we achieved from a sustainability point of view was very dependent on particular individuals being well disposed and somehow making it work in terms of the business environment. And that was a great at the time, but I think we've got to be moving to a much, a very different model now, because you can't scale based on that kind of model. That was actually the start of my own personal journey. 1997, I took a year off to go and do humanitarian work in post-Soviet Armenia. But one of the questions I was really grappling with myself at that time in terms of my career, and I was approaching kind of mid-career, was this question of, business in society and the impact of business on ecology and on society. And it was something I was personally very interested in. And I worked with an aid agency, and by March, I had decided that actually business was really, had the greatest capability to be a force for good in society and to, advance progress and well-being of individuals in society. And so I was very clear that I wanted to come back, and I came back into Schlumberger, and Schlumberger, was marvelous because they gave that support to that appetite, and myself and others. Of course, whenever one person has an idea, there's always somebody else having the same idea, and so kind of seeds of a movement where we're really starting at that point. And so, I've been in this space now. This has become the sustainability space, for what is it, 27 years at this point, and I've been waiting, for what's happening right now for a long time, and I've been trying to, enable it myself in my own role and as the kind of in-house canary in the mine, and now is when the rubber's really hitting the road. And unfortunately, now is also, when the state of, the external conditions, particularly the environment, are really quite drastic and really very worrying. But I don't take that as a negative. I think, for me, we talk about all these metrics and ESG metrics. And for me, one of my metrics has been the day that the R&D community and the day that reservoir engineers are starting to talk about sustainability seriously, then we're going to be talking, and we're really going to start taking the kind of actions which will deliver this balance between nature and man, at scale. And so I think it's very exciting to be here with you and to be able to engage with you as representatives, really, I suppose, of an R&D community. And I can see your next 2 talks are already, very deep dives on sustainability topics. So, to go now to GAIA, which is the name that we've given to the Society of Petroleum Engineers Sustainability Program. We call it GAIA because, and intentionally, because Gaia is the Greek personification for Mother Earth. And there are 2 reasons there. One is that you cannot get to the right sustainability conversation unless the Earth, the planet, is right at the center of that conversation. If the conversation is with, us as companies or us as a sector at the center, and we're viewing it as, our relationship externally, internally, we cannot access the real, value creating conversations. And so we wanted to put Mother Earth right at the center. The second reason was because as, a Society of Petroleum Engineers, but not just, we're multidisciplinary, we've got 8 different disciplines. Our industry has a very intimate relationship with Mother Earth. And so we have a greater understanding of the inner workings than most others, and so we felt it was also appropriate, and it was a way of kind of resolving our relationship and creating comfort with being able to talk about, you know, the earth in ways that are non-defensive and that are creative. So if we go, this very quickly, I'm leaving this with you. I'm not going to go through this slide, but the point of this slide is to say that this is a journey. We didn't just wake up and jump on a bandwagon. There was a whole journey of us, you know, we have to go, we don't necessarily have road to Damascus moments. There's an organic journey. And I think what's really important here is to recognize that there is a milestone where we need to move beyond the kind of source of industry shame, which has really characterized the last 20 to 30 years of effort. And it actually hindered and inhibited the engagement with the majority of the industry, the people who are sitting below what I call the sustainability glass floor. And they are the operations and the R&D community who really carry the sustainability performance on their shoulders and yet are not enabled. And so this program, we created it in order to enable that population. We had a proof of concept event in 2019. We brought together 55 individuals who represented 8 different stakeholder groups, and we wanted to test the hypothesis that people of very divergent points of view could actually co-create and do something, you know, together. And we didn't want to replicate, we want to be additional. And so we said, we want to go for the white space, we want to go for the third space, and we want to be doing things that really play to our extraordinary strengths and serve everybody else's efforts. And this was something we were very, very committed to. This was not going to be box ticking and saying, oh yeah, we're doing ESG, we're doing sustainability. No, we were like, where can we have the highest leverage so that we can enable all of these other efforts? Because we're an association and we're an association of individuals. And so we have freedoms that companies, you know, often don't have, or other organizations. And so through this whole, you know, process and the subsequent incubation process, we're literally on the cusp now of scaling GAIA. It's happening over the next few weeks, where it's being scaled throughout the entire SPE organization. And it's basically 3 things. One, it's a brand, and I'm not going to give you a lesson on brand identity. I think everybody here, I'm sure, understands the value of a brand and how it's really important to have consistency that supports and reinforces and grows that brand. The consistency comes through this programming framework that we have developed. It's a 9-element framework, which I'm going to show you very briefly, which then supports the events and the publications, which are the 2 pillars through which, or the 2 vectors through which the SPE operationalizes its services to its 160,000 members in 140 countries. So that's a huge ecosystem that can potentially be mobilized. And we did a tipping point calculation, and we reckon, you know, that if 250,000 people are enabled and really kind of get with the program, so to speak, then we have a tipping point in the industry where we would move very much beyond the defensive mindset into an innovation-driven and a co-creation mindset. So we have these 9 elements. What's important is that they're framed by principles, pathways, and priorities. And the principles determine the quality and the ambition that we can have. And this is where I think I'd love to hear your point of view on a report that came out just 2 weeks ago. I'm sure everybody's, you know, cited it in some form or other. And it basically tells us we're on target to deliver 1% of emissions reductions, which is basically 3 to 4% warming. And clearly that's not a pretty picture. And we need to deliver, if we want to deliver 1.5 to 2 degrees, we need to deliver 25 to 45% emissions reduction. So we're way off track. And so something really significant has to change. And so this is where our principles are about saying, whatever we do, it has to be consistent with the scale and the urgency of the challenges. so that we're, again, not just box ticking. And this is where the sections and the chapters and the technical sections and the standing committees can be mobilized around these principles and have these ambitions. Pathways are about the strengths. And so the SPE is a technical society which doesn't have an advocacy mission. So it's got technical independence, which is really important in terms of credibility. Obviously innovation, it's a no-brainer. But the other two pathways that we think we can make a huge contribution to are measuring what matters. A lot of ESG is not measuring what matters. And so it's not producing fit for decision data. It's not producing data that can really give insights that can drive performance, as opposed to just meeting disclosure needs. And so we think that our technical knowledge amongst the membership can be brought to bear on a small number of very significant metrics. And then listening and communicating, our venues can be places for multi-stakeholder, safe collective engagement. And then the priorities, energy transition, obviously, but the thing that we bring is the connection. One of the things that worries me is new toy syndrome, I call it, which is, we've got all of these smart engineers and scientists, and this is just a new frontier, a new technical frontier. To have a new mindset and also new competencies so that we can really integrate externalities. And then natural capital and regeneration and social responsibilities are the two other priorities, which would not be typically within our comfort zone. And that's where having an HSE and sustainability discipline can be helpful, because obviously we can play an enabling role. People like me are extremely comfortable with topics like natural capital. And I'm thrilled to see you've got soil on the topic in March or April, because the sequestration role of soil is incredibly important. I won't go into the detail here. This is the detailed framework which is going to be used by the sections in order to plan, all of their programming. Here you can see that we have quite a prestigious governance and oversight and some really amazing talent that we've been able to pull together, thanks to the nature of the SPE membership and also the reach of the SPE. So we've got some really incredible people, all sorts of ages as well. So it's really intergenerational and multidisciplinary, and we'll meet monthly and quarterly, depending on what the role is. And so we have these ambitions, these 3-year ambitions, really to build the fluency and to foster agency, I would say, is the biggest ambition that we can actually take some accountability for at this time, because I feel very strongly, and I'm seeing signs of it already, that actually we really can't anticipate what's going to be achieved, because I think, empowering and enabling, very intelligent and very worldly and seasoned people to really engage in this challenge of how to integrate externalities and how to risk allocate externalities is going to produce something really remarkable and game-changing. It's like the Industrial Revolution. We're on the edge of something that's that transformative. So I think I might stop here, Sudhir, and open up to questions. And I'll give you a version of the slides that you can share with everybody, so they can see some of the detail.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect, Joanne. And again, we can keep these running if there is a specific question which comes through, and you can refer to something in your slide. Then certainly we can go to those. But again, absolutely great what you laid out as where it was, where it is today, and very clear on what the 3-year ambition is going to be, etc. So wonderful. Thanks very much. Let's look at, because I think a few questions coming up again. Like we had mentioned, feel free to put in either in the chat or in the Q&A, preferably in the Q&A, and we'll certainly answer all of the ones which come through. Go ahead, Johanna. Can you see what I see?
I can, absolutely. So I can see a question here from David Horsop, which is, do people have to be members of the SPE to be active in GAIA? Absolutely not. That's the wonderful thing about GAIA. Obviously, we're very focused on that population, but we've created a GAIA community on LinkedIn, which an SPE community on LinkedIn, which allows us to then bring in non-SPE members into the conversation. And once we start the events programming as well, and so, you know, people now are kind of getting all dressed up, and we're creating places for them to go to, and obviously a non-SPE member is extremely welcome. And some people have actually joined SPE in order to be part of GAIA, which of course is fantastic as well, and we encourage that, but it's not a requirement. Yeah, there are guys. So from Sahana, we're creating committees. So if you here you see we've got regional liaisons, and each of these regional liaisons is events and programming, etc. And so you know, non-members again will be able to participate. I would suggest, if you're keen to participate and be kept informed, to join the GAIA LinkedIn community, and I'll provide the link to Sudhir so he can share it with you afterwards, or I'll try to go and pop it onto the screen shortly. Well, we've got 452 members now in our GAIA LinkedIn community, and it's really starting to become, you know, fairly dynamic. What we do is we curate content, and then it'll become a place, obviously, to be able, and in fact we're already doing that, is communicating the events, whether they're GAIA talks, which are virtual, and whether there'll be physical events, which obviously we're all dying to see resume before long. So Mark Perry, business and industry having highest impact. I don't mention government agencies. Yeah, so I think obviously, you know, all parties need to be engaged. And again, I think, you know, through the events that SPE creates, and we invite in guest speakers, there are fantastic ways to be able to bring in government agencies and regulatory agencies. We already do that, you know, in other aspects, whether it's on technology with, say, the IOGCC, or with the International Regulators Forum on the safety topics. So yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it has to be very joined up, and I think that's one of the strengths that we have is this convening capability, and to bring people into safe, kind of confident environments where they know they're not going to be, you know, attacked. I think the independence of the SPE and then the convening capability creates a very interesting environment for stakeholders and a whole range of points of view. And we've already been doing that in SPE events. And yeah, so absolutely. If I leave anybody out, it certainly wasn't deliberate. Calvin says, I'm encouraged to hear a mention of the operations folks who are not empowered. More explanation who they are and why they're important and what they could do. So, you know, I mean, I see, you know, having worked in this space for as long as I have, and Sudhir, maybe you can speak to this, and I'm sure others in the audience, it feels like sometimes I say the disclosure tail is wagging the performance dog. And so we've got this huge kind of ESG you know, phenomenon which has emerged, and you know, for me it's ESG 4.0. We're now, this is the fourth emanation, and this is the one that has definitely woken everybody up. And a lot of the focus is on disclosure and on obtaining data, but very few operations people will take sustainability reports and read them and say, oh yeah, that really speaks to me, that's useful, that helps me make a decision, you know, to allocate capex, or that helps me make a decision to, you know, invest in, you know, new gaskets so I'm not leaking methane, or oh yeah, that really helps me build a business case for stopping flaring, or that really helps me with my local content, you know, obligations or ambitions. And so there's quite a disconnect between, you know, meeting these external stakeholder requirements and then actually enabling, you know, the performance itself. And my observation is that it's like this, you know, a disclosure ant is pulling a performance gorilla up a hill. And we're not, in operations is not engaged. And why are they not engaged? It's not because they're kind of bad people who are just, you know, sitting in a corner counting money like Scrooge. It's because there are very genuine challenges, and they're not talked about enough. They're not talked enough about. And so, you know, I see operations people, you know, being told, you know, make the top line, make the bottom line. Oh, by the way, save lives and save the planet at lunchtime. And we're not going to give you any resources. And in fact, you're going to do it on fewer resources. And so there has to be a space to hold that conversation. And I mean, I think R&D, it's a different set of you know, parameters. I've always been surprised at how R&D has engaged so late. I would have liked to see R&D engaging much earlier, and I don't really know why. That, I guess the incentives weren't there. So I know that's a big, you know, generalization, and I do. What we have seen is a lot of ad hoc initiatives and flagship initiatives undertaken by operations, but most of them are not equipped with the ability to be accountable for their impact. And in a cyclical business like ours, they tend to suffer as well. You know, so when there's a downturn, you know, it's very easy to stop those initiatives, and that can cause more harm than good overall. So I don't know if that answers your question, Calvin, and I would love to talk more with you, and I'd even be happy to chat with you offline, because this is my real focus is on operationalizing sustainability.
There are a couple of questions, Johanna, in the chat side. There is a question from Kinda, which says sustainability is becoming an important topic in the oil and gas industry, and it seems to be accelerating lately. What is your opinion on what has triggered this big acceleration and that we are seeing in our industry? You might have answered it through your presentation and through some of the questions which had come in the Q&A, but anything else you want to add to that question?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting to see, you know, when COVID-19, you know, started and became recognized as a pandemic, there was a lot of chatter about, oh no, this is a death knell for sustainability. Everybody's going to be managing the pandemic, and climate is going to drop down in the agenda. And in fact, it hasn't. And I do think, you know, the pandemic created, it kind of blasted open, you know, a huge international conversation. And in fact, and very quickly, there was recognition of the connection between the pandemic and sustainability. And really that's the big elephant in the sustainability room is, you know, the impact of human activity on nature. And so our encroachment on nature. And breaching what are called the planetary boundaries. Johan Rockström calls the planetary boundaries. There are 9 planetary boundaries, and we're in breach of 4 of them. And one of them is the biodiversity boundary. And so I think the pandemic really was a massive accelerant, but there was a big movement already in place. But the ESG movement suddenly, I think also, you know, Larry Fink and you know, various leaders making big statements, the signatures last year, the Business Roundtable, which has been criticized, etc. But, you know, I think there were some significant milestones where forces that had not been in play before started to come into play. And I think some real money you know, was starting to be directed towards sustainability challenges as well.
Very good. Hope, Kinda, that answered your question. We have one question from our good friend, Hossam. Hossam, great to see you on the call and the session. How do you see the collaboration between various organizations and programs coordinated through GAIA, considering the wider aspects of the topics discussed and stakeholders? Will there be a mentoring program where you can allocate matter experts, projects, etc.? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And in fact, we are already doing that to some degree. So for instance, we've kind of repositioned the HSE and sustainability discipline as recognizing it as an enabling discipline. And so our discipline has acted as subject matter experts on sustainability to support 11 energy transition events that the SPE has either already produced or is in the process of producing. 3 have already been produced. That's on hydrogen, on methane, on carbon capture and storage, etc. And I think without the sustainability subject matter expertise, the temptation would be to focus those topics on pure technical content. And so we can bring in things like stakeholder engagement, for instance, or why does any of this matter, kind of putting it into context. Also bringing in topics to do with, accounting for impact, which is a new domain of measurement. And I think that's the real deal, because frankly, accounting for sustainability, so-called sustainability activity doesn't really lead to insights. So, but I think we need more of that. And I think, very, very much so. And there'll be a lot more osmosis. And we see huge experts in these technical areas are now engaging, much more in the broader sustainability topics. So yeah, I think that subject matter expertise and the sharing of it and the formalizing of it is extremely important going forward. Lynn Frostman is asking.
In the same spirit, Lynn has a great follow-up question. How is GAIA planning to engage the startup community in your efforts? Another important part of the community.
Yeah, so I mean, and I see, and I follow a lot of what's happening in Houston, and it's like the kind of energy transition startup capital of the world, it seems, at the moment. And actually, we're very proud that quite a few of those startups are actually members of GAIA. So, people like Mohi Karimi, or at Semvita, for instance, is a member, and then people at GHD SAT, etc. So, I think, first of all, we're an open community, so we love to have these individuals, join the community. I think we can give them a platform to be able to share their ideas. They're often people who are very, very confident in terms of, creating this future. They've got a very positive and optimistic and future-oriented, discourse. And so, we do GAIA talks, for instance, and here, if you see, we've got this whole library on SPE Live. So I think we can give them a platform as well. In fact, you're making me think we should carve out, startup as actually a theme of our GAIA talks, so that we're regularly and more formalizing that. And we can talk offline, Lynn. I'd be really happy to speak with you offline.
Sure, and particularly since Houston is encouraging a lot of these innovation hubs who started somewhere else and are now blossoming in the inviting city of Houston. I mean, I give one example. Yep. I'm just giving that as an example. There are a bunch of others which are coming in as well, and that one is Greentown Labs, originally started in Boston. Has a very great footprint and setup in Boston, and then they are expanding that footprint in a much more accelerated way. The lessons learned up there, etc., right here in Houston. So, here is a wonderful organization, and like that, there are quite a few other organizations which are coming up. Yeah. Jeannie has a great question. What about organizations like SpaceX? You have a comment on that?
Can you introduce us? I think, we haven't engaged with SpaceX, but, which I think it could be interesting. I think we'd have to be, I think we probably have something to offer. I mean, we'd certainly love to have them speaking. Again, this is part of empowering and engaging, the engineers and scientists, is being able to connect them with all of these exciting, initiatives. But no, we haven't directly engaged SpaceX, but, why not? Why not? And actually tomorrow, Sudhir, I'm speaking with the Gulf Coast section, which is the largest SPE section. It's got over 14,000 members, and that's based in Houston. And I'm going to be speaking with them. And actually, I think it'd be very interesting for them to be more aware of the work that you're doing. You know,
we are.
It's my
host SPE chapter. So
well,
I'm engaged with them.
Yeah. Would be.
I presented there a few times. They've invited me and presented in 2019. The annual GCS session was held at the Marriott in Houston, and I was a speaker there. So we certainly had an avenue to engage with the GCS SPE. David Horsup had a question using sustainability as a lens to view our industry problems, though. It moved very
absolutely.
New way of developing solutions need to give people permission to take care. I think it's probably more a comment, but you have anything to add to what David had to say?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really powerful statement, and I think that is the way to unlock the value on the one hand, but also to create that shift in mindset, which would allow us to consider externalities. And also to recognize that, you know, this doesn't happen in 24 hours. This is something that's a big source of frustration to me, is that there's really no incubation space to be able to have these conversations that need to take place. So, for instance, in the ESG space, I find that there's, you know, a really worrying lack of data science. So, you know, where is the incubation space that allows you know, that scientific input, you know, to create a roadmap. And the IEA is coming out with a roadmap, you know, on how we're going to deliver, you know, the energy transition. It's coming out in May. And I really hope it's going to be a very, you know, grounded document that, you know, we can all identify with and be able to say, oh, yep, I can integrate that in my, you know, ambitions or my you know, my objectives. But I think there's some very big transformations that we have to go through, and they're painful. And, you know, how do we reconcile the short term with the long term? You know, in operations and R&D being deeply connected to operations, we have a lot of short term incentives. But on the other hand, in the R&D community, there's a lot of tolerance of the long term view, because innovation doesn't happen in 24 hours either. And so maybe there's something to be learned from the R&D community about how do you create those incubation conditions, because we're not creating the conditions for success. I mean, if we are that far off meeting these targets, we're not creating the conditions for success. And I think, David, you're right. We have to give permission to care, because I think it is about hearts and minds, and trying to reconcile that. And then the follow through, you know, it's like in safety, you get these paradoxical, you know, injunctions, you know, where you're told you've got to save lives and you've got to make the top line and the bottom line, and you're not being given any resources. And so how do you actually do that? And I don't have the answer, but I think we need to work on, you know, together, the population of people who are most concerned. We need to work together on trying to create those conditions. And in GAIA, the first premise is, or the basic premise is, that we all need to start speaking the same language and create sustainability literacy. And then we can start, you know, we have a lot of extremely smart people. Everybody in the industry is a smart person. I put the link up. I think, am I still screen sharing, Sudhir?
Yes, you are, and we can see the links, Johanna.
You can see the link.
Any other questions here on the from talk. The audience?
I'm just looking here in the chat.
There are obviously right now, I think it is 17 SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously, based on which industry you are, each one is important. And again, based on the experiences, etc., one does take dominance over others based on the industry. From the energy industry, and particularly where you come from, Johanna, in kind of the top 2 or 3 ones, which are dominant ones, which ones have you seen as being very dominant from your perspective?
Well, I think SDG 13, obviously, which is, that's the climate objective. And that's one that we're, obviously very connected to, and where we can also, we're a huge provider of solutions. Recently SPE London organized a talk, and they had a member from Saudi Aramco speaking. And, I came away absolutely convinced that the energy transition can't happen without oil and gas, and oil and gas as the leader and the enabler of the energy transition. It's just not possible. No other sector has the capability. I would say, to be honest, SDG 5, I think is incredibly significant, and that's the gender. SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, because I think, the amount of value and that you can unlock by addressing gender diversity, I think, is absolutely massive, and can really contribute to the change in mindset that we need to bring about. Maybe SDG 17, or, Brian Sullivan, who's the executive director of IPIECA, which is the industry kind of single entry point for the UN into the industry, and is made up of, all of our top companies, top kind of 80 companies, and creating best practices on sustainability topics. He was asked this question, and he said SDG 16, which is peace, and I think, that's an important one, because I think, you do need relatively peaceful conditions or alignment generally in order to ensure that these achievements are sustainable, or can be sustained. SDG 17 on partnerships, I think, is important, kind of having to go, and this is in the GAIA principles on collaboration and engagement. Again, it's about being consistent with the scale and the urgency of the challenges, which really requires us to go outside our comfort zone and to, engage with people who don't like us, and who we don't necessarily like, and to collaborate with people where, we're different animals. And we don't go at the same speed, and we don't have the same modus operandi. And so, being able to take the time to figure out, ways to be able to align and operate with each other. So I think probably at this point in time, partnerships is also, or collaboration rather, is a really important one of the SDGs.
Excellent. Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned the 13, which is related to climate, and which is why I think it is going to be important what data the Sentinel-6 satellite was launched earlier this year between the European Space Agency and NASA and NOAA send data, because it's interesting. There is this since I think 1966 they've plotted the rise of the water levels, and at a rate of 3 millimeters per year, exponentially growing. It's time.
Yeah.
Great to see that they have put that as a strong focus to try and see what can be done around the world, specifically in that direction.
Yeah, and I think data is really key, and our industry can make massive contribution. I mean, our industry is a lot to do with data. I mean, it's absolutely, it's the second most important thing apart from oil and gas, is actually data. And we have, incredible expertise. And it's very clear in the sustainability space that, data, fit for decision data that generates insights, it's really missing. It's really missing. So that's an area where the industry, it's a kind of an enabler of all of the SDGs, and really very important. And I think our industry could also, be braver in terms of experimenting, like natural capital accounting is an emerging field. And, it's very hard to create a safe space you know, to be able to experiment and at the same time scale. You know, a lot of the experimentation takes place, you know, inside closed doors. And you know, my feeling is that every brain should be, you know, all hands on deck. You know, why should we be hiding all of this, creating best practices and then struggling to disseminate those best practices? You know, we need more bottom-up engagement. Otherwise, it's a total waste of great brain power.
Absolutely.
And also the devil's in the detail.
Correct. And I just love that comment Paresh has put into the chat. And I think it's probably a great way. I don't see any other questions. We are also coming up on the top of the hour, and probably people have other sections to go to. So Paresh, thank you for putting in that comment that a just, sustainable and equitable energy transition to net zero is at the heart of achieving the Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The industry has a critical role to advance in advancing the number 7, the golden thread to achieving all other SDGs. So I think it's a great, Johanna, again, thank you so much. Yeah,
GAIA.
go ahead, Johanna.
No, I was just going to say, that was Puresh who asked that question?
Yep, he put in that as an observation and a comment, yes.
Okay, please join GAIA, Puresh.
Outstanding.
Everybody.
Listen, absolutely fantastic session. Johanna, thank you so much. Participants, thank you so much for joining today. Stay in touch with our communication. Information comes out every other week, certainly in TCC News, and we keep our website updated. I want to give a big thank also to Mark, who has worked behind the scenes tirelessly. Mark is our executive director, and Johanna, stay safe. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you in our next session, and please take care of each other.